Just want to remind you guys, this episode is presented by Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
What is going on, Colts Nation? Welcome back to another episode of Bring the Juice. Guys, we did a video pretty much very similar to this one a month ago talking about like our dream off season and talking about like players we want to get into the fold. Well, now we've seen a bunch of players getting released. We've seen a bunch of players on the trade block. Combine happened. So there's a whole lot of new information. So we kind of wanted to revisit this idea a little bit, especially since it's only a few days away from when free agency actually kicks off. So kind of go into a couple things here as to what we think the Indianapolis Colts should do for this off season for us to feel like we've actually turned the corner. And Cody, I think first and foremost, the one move that I think all of us can sit here and say that, you know, you and I both probably think the Colts should try to do to make this team, you know, just that much better in 2025. And it's the news that came out just a few days ago, not even days ago, literally a day from when we recorded this, was that Trey Hendrickson is requesting a trade out of Cincinnati. I don't know about you. You can tell me if you differ or not, but I think that's the first move that the Indianapolis Colts should definitely try to make happen to improve this defense because it just makes so much sense.
I would agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense for the Colts to go in that direction, right? Because obviously the familiarity with Lou Anarumo, that's first and foremost the biggest thing. You know, we've heard how much Trey Hendrickson respects Lou Anarumo, and heck, he was on Pat McAfee's show a couple months ago talking and raving about Lou Anarumo when the Colts did hire him. So definitely think, Derek, if there's any defensive coordinator out there that he respects a heck of a lot, it has to be Lou Anarumo. And of course, Charlie Partridge, the Indianapolis Colts defensive line coach, he was the head coach in college where Trey Hendrickson went. So there are two connections right there, and especially his position coach who coached in the 4 years he was at college, which is just crazy. Like, what are the odds of that, right? So I think a lot of those connections right off the bat there, they make some sense. You know, we've kind of heard some rumors that Cincinnati might be looking at a late second, early third rounder. I think you could easily get a third rounder and maybe throw in a player or something like that to make this easy and make this kind of sweeten the deal a little bit. You know, because there's going to be, if you bring in Trey Hendrickson, there's going to be some other players maybe currently at that edge position that might have their snaps and will have their snaps cut into a lot with Trey Hendrickson on the roster, right? So people have thrown out the name of Kwity Paye, right? Does he fit for what Lou Anarumo wants to do on the defensive line? And if not, maybe you package a thing with him because, you know, both him and Trey Hendrickson are in the last years of their contracts with their respective teams. So that would make some sense. And obviously Cincinnati really doesn't have, you know, much in the DB department. So, you know, somebody's even thrown around the idea of throwing in Juju Brents, you know, as well. I've seen that. But whatever it takes, Derek, it doesn't seem like it's going to be a major investment from a trade standpoint, right? You're not going to be trading a first-round pick to get Trey Hendrickson. You might not even have to trade a second-round pick to get him. It might be a third-round pick. And to be honest with you, Derek, I don't care how good of a GM you are. I mean, you're not going to get a Trey Hendrickson more than likely in the third round. It's just not a reality,
Even in the
right?
second. I mean, you couldn't get somebody in the second round that even comes close to the production of a Trey Hendrickson.
Yeah, and there's a reason why Trey Hendrickson, Derek, will be a little bit cheaper, right? Obviously, he's going to be looking for a new deal. He's also, you know, around 30 years old. So there are a couple factors there. He's not, you know, last year, for example, Brian Burns, who's in his mid-20s. He's not that type of player, but he is very productive. His production has been a lot more. Obviously, he led the league in sacks. So that is a factor as well. But I do think the fact that he's going to need a new contract, he's going to want a good amount of deals. I mean, Derek, you saw what Max Crosby got paid. So he's going to probably want a pretty big deal. But I guess I just keep coming back to with Trey Hendrickson. If you're going to invest financially a lot of money into a position, you might as well do it to a position that matters. Now, I'm not talking about offensive guard, as much as we love Quentin Nelson. I'm not even talking about linebacker. I'm talking about an edge guy, a true difference maker that, yeah, while he, who knows what's going to happen when he gets a little bit older, but he's still, Derek, regardless of that, he still is coming off a season where he led the NFL in sacks. Colts haven't had an alpha like that since 2013, well over a decade now. The Colts have not had a player of his caliber, even anywhere close, to be honest. So it just makes a ton of sense. I mean, Derek, we saw what the Colts did in Gus Bradley's first season with them, right? They let him go get a couple guys, some guys that he was familiar with. Obviously, the big name Yannick Ngakoue that they traded for. And, they obviously thought Rock was not a fit for their system, and they traded him away to go get Yannick. And obviously it didn't work out because Yannick only played for one season there. But you know what I mean? Do they do something similar in that way for Lou Anarumo? They go get him his guy. They go get him his number one choice, I'm sure, from any player on the Cincinnati Bengals that he had last year. Because as bad as that defense was, Trey Hendrickson was like probably one of the lone bright spots there on that Cincinnati defense. So, yeah, it makes a ton of sense. It makes a ton of sense for the Indianapolis Colts to do. And you got to think Lou Anarumo, just automatically just having him would give the Indianapolis Colts right away an inside track to get him. But again, Chris Ballard's got to make it happen. It's not just going to be like, oh, yeah, he's just going to come over for nothing. Like, there's going to be some stuff that needs to happen. And Chris Ballard, he talked all the time about, how he needed to finish deals. And obviously wasn't able to finish the deal on Danielle Hunter a year ago. This could be kind of that redemption a little bit, right? To bring in a true vet guy that you could pair along Latu for the next couple of years and just talk about a edge pairing there, Derek, especially if Latu can get to the point we think he's capable of getting to. That would be fantastic. So I think it makes a ton of sense there to trade for Trey Hendrickson if you're the Indianapolis Colts and Chris Ballard, Shane Steichen, because, Derek, they're in a very much do or die season, right? This is going to be it for them. So they need some guys that are going to impact from day one. And Trey Hendrickson would be the ultimate player here that they could acquire that would do that for them.
Yep, 100%. You want an impact player? There's one that's available right now, and there is just virtually no reason that you cannot be the team that goes and gets this guy and does what is needed to make this team better. And also, guys, for anyone that is watching, be sure to drop in the comment section what you guys think the Indianapolis Colts need to do this offseason to make you feel better about the direction in which the Indianapolis Colts are going. And heck, even if you think there's absolutely nothing that the Indianapolis Colts can do to make you feel better about 2025, then you can go ahead and comment that in the comment section too. We don't mind. Okay, so Cody, this one I think you and I could potentially disagree on. We'd talk about the quarterback competition. It sure sounds like Ballard's going to try to get somebody. Ultimate question is, do you get one in free agency or do you get one in the draft? Now, the only thing is like, again, why would you want to try to get quarterback competition, real legitimate quarterback competition from within the draft for which, you're already thin on draft picks, right? You have a lot of holes on the team that still need to be filled. And potentially, if you trade for Trey Hendrickson, that's going to be one less pick you're probably going to be able to get as well. Maybe even more. Who knows? They might have to trade two late picks to get him. So, that's another question, right? Like, why would you invest one of your few draft picks that you have on another young rookie quarterback that still needs to learn the name of the game in the NFL? Just makes more sense to grab somebody from who's already been in the NFL and understands how the game works. Jones and Fields are definitely the two names that I think about more and more. Probably most likely Jones, because Jones makes more sense I think Fields is going to potentially get a higher contract from somebody than what the Indianapolis Colts might want to give. I don't think you'd have to give $10 million to Daniel Jones, 10 or more million. You might have to for Fields. But with Jones, I think, you can get him for a relatively cheap deal. You can get him in here to compete with Anthony Richardson. Daniel Jones definitely has the skill set that could work for Shane Steichen's offense. What say you about that quarterback competition?
I think you're right. Like, I think Daniel Jones makes probably more sense for the Colts right now from a financial standpoint. As much as we like Justin Fields, Derek, Daniel Jones is going to probably be cheaper, right? I think the Spot Track estimated contract for him is around $5 million, whereas who knows with Justin Fields, he might be double that. So as much as I think right now, I think Justin Fields is a better quarterback than Daniel Jones. I think Daniel Jones has an opportunity, Derek, to come in and seriously compete, right? And obviously we saw things just fell apart in New York. Nothing was working, nothing good happened. And obviously he just spent the majority of last season after all that happened, the second half of the season, as the backup to Sam Darnold, right? So not a lot happened from that standpoint. But Derek, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but how many times have we seen these former first-round pick guys that don't work out in a couple places, and then they go to the right situation? I'm not saying it's going to be Indy, but they go to the right situation and they kind of revitalize their careers in certain ways. Again, Daniel Jones, not a good quarterback in his time with the New York Giants. I mean, let's not sugarcoat that at all.
Yeah.
But I am intrigued, Derek, still by some of the physical skills that he does have, because we've seen him have a pretty solid season a couple years ago with Brian Daboll, when they actually had some things around him a little bit more, right? And so I'd be intrigued to see him with this current Colts offense, what that would look like and what you could potentially see in him. And I know a lot of people don't like Daniel Jones. They're like, absolutely not. And I know the idea is not sexy at all, but I talk about the most realistic option. It does really seem like Daniel Jones would be that for the Indianapolis Colts, as much as some people hate that. I think it probably makes the most sense for the Colts to go at this point with a Daniel Jones type of player, because I think he realistically could push, but he may not be a guy that goes out there and earns that job. But Derek, he's got all the talent in the world. I mean, obviously enough that the Giants felt like they could, needed to go get him, and obviously it didn't work out. But I would be okay with Daniel Jones. I wouldn't love it. I wouldn't hate it. But for $5 million, Derek, for a backup quarterback or a guy that's going to push AR, you don't want that guy to win that job. If you're the Colts, you don't want that to happen. Right? So I think Daniel Jones could kind of be, I think you said earlier when we talked about, some of these quarterbacks, he could kind of be the best of both worlds, where he's not like a Sam Darnold, where it's like, well, obviously you're giving up on AR at that point, but he's not quite I don't know, throw in, random backup
like
quarterback.
Zach Wilson or something,
Yeah, he's not like that, right? So that's what I would say is I'd be all right with Daniel Jones. Justin Fields, obviously, if they were around the same price, obviously Justin Fields. But I don't think they're going to be, Derek. So I'd be okay with them. Any one of these quarterbacks I'd be all right with, just for the specific reason of they're both former first-round picks. They both have a lot of talent. And they both just haven't worked out in the places they've been. But we've seen it all the time. Like I said, change of scenery sometimes can be the best thing for some of these guys. So I'd be intrigued to see who they do bring in. It sounds like Daniel Jones is kind of the name that a lot of people have talked about. And from a financial standpoint, like you said, especially if you're going to go potentially trade for Trey Hendrickson and sign a player or two in free agency that could cost some money, are you really wanting to spend an extra $5 million on a backup quarterback? Or a quarterback that might not be a long-term piece here. So that's what I would say.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, moving on to the next piece here that the Indianapolis Colts probably need to do, regardless if they don't do either of the things we mentioned before, do or don't. The Indianapolis Colts need to revamp their secondary, Cody. No question about it. Chris Ballard said in his end-of-the-year presser, he allowed certain position groups to try to gel together with some more continuity, and that was probably one of the groups that he was mentioning, and it just didn't work out. Right now you have Kenny Moore, but Kenny Moore might be on potentially his last contract with this team. He may potentially not be around for much longer because, he is about to be 31 years old and, he's certainly not getting any younger. And then Jalen Jones, solid corner, but nothing crazy. And then outside of that, you really don't have a lot more else right now. You don't have depth, and you certainly don't have another guy on that outside that you trust to be able to, one, be available, second, to actually be able to do the job at an elite level either. So Colts need to definitely do something, even at the safety position too. You don't know if you're going to re-sign Julian Blackmon or not. And then even if you did, still need to try to get some depth at the position or get a really good player to play alongside Nick Cross. So, Cody, I'll ask you too. Obviously, you and I have talked about it. I know you definitely feel the same way and how important upgrading the secondary is. But if you had to pick whichever group, safety or corner, to make a big free agent splash move, which would you prefer they do? Corner or safety? As we said, guys, today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Now, what is Prize Picks? Prize Picks is the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. Instead of battling against thousands of other players across platforms, you're basically picking 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you're choosing more or less on those stat projections to be able to watch those winnings roll in. It's very easy. Do you guys want to play along at some of Prize Picks' favorite players like rapper Meek Mill and UFC fighter Sugar Sean O'Malley? Well, if you guys sign up today, you can find the community plays under the promos tab of the app to view the entries of some of the biggest names on the platform and be a part of that as well. You can now win up to 100 times your money on Prize Picks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can turn $10 into $1,000 just like that with NBA, NHL, and college basketball entries today on Prize Picks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. Like a lot of other things, guys, they also offer injury insurance, so your entries stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. So if someone exits the game in the first half and does not return in the second, that player projection won't count against you and the rest of your entry stays live. So it's great bounce back for that one. What I love about the app as well, guys, is it's not just sports like NBA, NHL, football, and tennis, and baseball, and all these other things, but there's also a lot of others that go into it as well. If you like to place entries on video game situations like Call of Duty, CS2, Apex, if that's something that appeals to you, there's a wide variety of sports and video games and everything else that you can place entries on. And I love how expansive it is. Even just looking at the NBA, there's entries you can make with turnovers, with points. You can do combo deals, dunks, field goals attempted, all of these different things. So there's just so many different ways to make money off of these entries. Be sure to download the app today and use the code JUICE to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup.
Yeah, I've thought about this for a little bit now. I would probably say corner, to be honest with you, for the simple reason of I think there's going to be some better safeties available when you draft. I do. And I think the safety room also has some guys that maybe aren't the top of the market, but you could pay and, wouldn't cost nearly as much, but could still be solid players for you, right? So I would say probably corner for me. Charvarius Ward's obviously a big name. We already talked about a lot of these other corners as well that the Indianapolis Colts could go get. So I'd probably say corner just for the simple fact that you don't have a guy right now as your, as a #1 outside corner. Juju Brent's the guy that Derek has not stayed healthy for any real time with the Indianapolis Colts. So can't rely on him to be your #1 corner. You almost have to play as he's not on the roster right now. Mm-hmm. And you just need to really have a lockdown corner. I mean, Derek, it's been a while since the Colts have had a lockdown true #1 corner. Probably 2022 with Stephon Gilmore. And he's getting older, right? He was a 30-year-old corner at that point, 31, whatever he was at that
I
point,
think it was
31, 32.
32 at that point,
Yeah,
Cody.
so he wasn't a long-term piece at all.
Mhm.
I think you need to get a guy in a multi-year deal here at corner. That would make a lot of sense to me. But to me, Derek, they're so interchangeable that if the Colts elected to go the other route, I'd be totally okay with that too. I mean, there's a lot of good players there. Javon Holland highlights a lot of different safeties here that will become available and are going to be set to hit free agency here. I just feel like with guys like Malachi Starks and Nick Amawori, a couple of those guys right there, I think it's more likely they're available at 15 than cornerback, like Will Johnson. So that's kind of why I have that in my opinion, and that's kind of my reasoning for that. But again, they're so interchangeable, Derek. I think both need to be addressed multiple times, to be honest with you. You need to get that guy that's your number one clear-cut starter, and you need to add some serious depth in there because cornerback has a little bit of depth. Safety has none. I mean, literally no depth at all right now. I mean, who do you have on your roster right now, Derek, that you think legitimately can be any sort of help to your safety room? Nick Cross is the only one that comes to mind for me. Really, Nick Cross is. Rodney Thomas is, I guess, technically on your roster, but Derek, he hasn't done anything.
There really isn't another safety behind it. And, obviously, if you exclude Julian Blackmon, if we're presuming that they're not going to re-sign him, even if they did, you're right. Rodney Thomas, he was great his rookie year, but he almost practically played his way onto the practice squad at some point. Ronnie Harrison is on and off this team all the time. And I don't remember. It's Daniel Scott. That's the name I was thinking of. So Daniel Scott, there were rumors of Daniel Scott being the second or being the free safety for the Indianapolis Colts this year. There was a potential that was the voice going around that Daniel Scott was going to be the number one free safety ahead of Nick Cross going into it before he had his second straight lower leg injury that ended up costing him his second season before he even got a chance to get on the field. Certainly hope that this third time's the charm. He'll actually be able to stay on the field and actually be able to contribute in some way this year. But yeah, outside of that, you don't got anybody. You don't really you have three safeties really. So you really need to get, technically you only have two if you really want to think about it, because you still don't know if you're going to get Julian Blackmon back or not. So no doubt safety's a more need for bodies at the moment, but I think corner is mainly the one to make sure you try to find that number one true outside corner.
Yeah, no doubt at all. You definitely need both these positions. You need a number one guy to come in both of them. So, I'm good with either, to be honest with you.
Yep, absolutely. This one we really won't get into too much because this is just easy to talk about. You need depth at certain positions, and I'm talking just free agency here for this moment, because for draft purposes, you'll probably look at other positions like running back and tight end and, in the secondary as well, and free agency as well. But some of the main positions I look at, Cody, for depth in free agency, the tight end group, I think you and I have said that they should double dip in that group once in free agency and probably one in the draft as well. Offensive line, you definitely want to take advantage of that too, especially since just overall this offensive line group for the draft is really not that strong in the later rounds. So you kind of want to take a chance and make sure that you get some solid backup pieces for this upcoming year, because it's going to be needed. And obviously defensive tackle as well. Cody, I would put my bank account on it that Ballard drafts a defensive tackle at some point in this draft class, because there's a lot of them. There's a lot of good late ones too. But I also think that's another position that you need to take advantage of in free agency. Is there any others that you feel like free agency wise that you need to take advantage of for depth purposes?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I probably would say you find, an impact guy at either corner or safety, But I do think, Derek, you can find some lower level type of guys as well that, have played a little bit that could come in and fill, some backup roles, right? Specifically, probably at safety, I would say. I could see them signing, if they sign, say, even a veteran safety, to be a starter, I could see them signing somebody, that's more of that backup third type of safety, because Derek, that could be valuable to have another guy in there, to help you out. And like we talked about, the depth is virtually non-existent. So I would say safety would be another one I definitely would be interested in for the Indianapolis Colts. I don't know how I would feel about, I don't think wide receiver, you really need to do anything there, to be honest with you. Wide receiver is like the one position right now that I think is pretty cut and dry. I mean, honestly,
You have
you have your
four
top
guys
four. You
on
have,
there
if you
that
bring
you
back
could build
Ashton
from.
Doolin, you have Anthony Gould. I mean, that's your six right there.
Mhm.
So I feel pretty good about that. So probably it would only just add safety.
Yep, I definitely agree. And then one of the last things to mention for the rest of the off season heading into it, we talk about the draft a little bit. Again, it comes to a couple different things with I'm not really talking much about depth, more about what the Indianapolis Colts should be looking to do with that first round pick. Now, obviously, it's all going to depend upon what they do in free agency. But let's say, Cody, that they do everything that we said that we needed them to do, right? They trade for Trey Hendrickson. They bring in quarterback competition in free agency, and then they get a decent name in the secondary, maybe a corner, right? Let's say they get a corner in free agency. And then, they get one or two other players in a couple other positions. Kind of narrows down a few different areas that you go into. The names that most of Colts Nation has been talking about is probably going to remain the same. You're talking Tyler Warren, you're talking Malachi Starks, you're talking Will Johnson if he fell that late. You're talking about a Jihad Campbell potentially at 14 as well. Cody, if the Colts made the moves that we suggested here, what is the direction that you feel the Colts should go with in that first round?
I think it really depends how they address the secondary in free agency. That will tell everything. So I would say, Derek, if they go and sign Javon Holland or somebody like that, some notable free agent and safety, I'd say, Will Johnson or trade back at that point, to be honest with you. Or if, they go and address it at corner, Malachi Starks or trade back Freeman Worry. Like, there are options here for the Colts at those positions. Tight end is just so interesting because I just honestly don't know what they're going to do at tight end. I mean, I love Tyler Warren. I would love him at 14, but I have a hard time thinking he's going to be there, Derek. I kind of struggle to see him falling all the way to 14. We've seen him go as early as 7 to the New York Jets, I believe. So who's to say? Who knows at this point? But even if they did trade back, there are tight ends, Derek, in that late first round. Colston Loveland is a big name that a lot of people have talked about as well. I honestly think, Derek, if the Colts were to make a trade and send away some draft capital, to me, that almost increases the likelihood they trade back in the first round because they're going to acquire more picks. They're probably going to acquire, I don't know, like a day 2 pick of some sort. Who knows, maybe a 3rd round, 4th round pick, something like that, or maybe even more than that, depending how far they go back. So I think that would make some sense there if they're wanting to kind of recoup a little bit, especially if we're talking about the idea, Derek, that there is like outside of the top 10, we had this conversation outside of the top 10. A lot of people have said there's not a lot of movement from 11 all the way to the mid 30s, right? So if you're able to trade back and, get a guy in somewhere in the 20s and you're able to trade back and get a pick within the top 40 or something like that, that could be a real possibility if you feel like that is true. So there's a lot of directions the Colts could go here when it comes to this position, but it'll be so fascinating to see how they address it. But I would say, either if none of these players are available or you feel like there's an option there to trade down, I don't see that being as a problem at all.
Yeah, no doubt. There's a lot of great things that the Indianapolis Colts can do this offseason, guys. Ultimately, the question is Ballard going to accomplish any of this, right? We mentioned it. These are the things that the Indianapolis Colts could do to make this team turn around. This is what you need to do. It's plausible. It's possible. Ballard's just got to go out and do it. Will he do it? I assume most of you will probably say no, but we'll reserve that judgment for when it does or doesn't happen. But anyways, that's going to do it for this one, guys. Again, leave a comment if you made it this far in the video on what you guys think about this. But let us know your thoughts. Thank you so much for tuning in. And as always, go Colts.